once you have those milestones identified and the KPIs identified, you go back to that secret shopper experience where you saw all of the ways that your customer experience is out of alignment. And now you get to optimize for one KPI on each of those milestones. It is just a much more organized, systematic way of optimizing your customer's experience.
Today, I'm very excited to be joined by Georgiana Laudi. If you don't know who she is the co-author of Forget the Funnel, a customer-led approach to driving predictable recurring revenue. She's also host of the Forget the Funnel podcast and co-founder of Forget the Funnel, a consultancy that helps B2B SaaS founders achieve scale. Gio, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much. I recognize a lot of repetition there, but hey,
it's smart branding. Right? It's really smart branding. So today, we're going to explore a framework to help businesses grow, whether you are a SaaS company or not a SaaS company. I'm very excited to dive in. But before we go there, I'd love to hear a little bit of your story. How did you get into marketing?
Well, I mean, the actual story of how I got into marketing that's a great question, but that was an eternity ago. I studied communications in university, and I just sort of got pulled towards the internet. So I never did traditional marketing. It was always online marketing. And I just sort of was pulled in that direction, and I never kind of looked back. And then that was early 2000s. And then around 2010, actually it was about 2008, 2009, I discovered Twitter. And then Twitter pulled me into the local tech community. And then the local tech community really pulled me into SaaS. And then I was like, okay, this is where marketing has a really critical role to play, because SaaS businesses understand the value of marketing post-acquisition and marketing's impact on revenue growth. I'm still talking about that to this day, but back then I was convinced that this was the place for me. I've never really looked back. I love SaaS and recurring revenue business models, partially for that reason. Now what I would describe what I do is much broader than marketing, but really the heart was really there.
Tell us a little bit about Forget the Funnel, because it's such an interesting headline.
Yeah, so it sort of came from, the working in tech, especially at the time where it was sort of born from, was this sort of general disdain for marketing in tech. Not a lot of necessarily understanding, or some unfair expectations, or, just unrealistic expectations of marketing sometimes by some tech founders, very product-focused founders, tech-focused founders, really just not understanding marketing very well, and really, having unrealistic expectations. Also in marketing, and a lot of customer-facing teams really getting stuck in the weeds and being bogged down in the weeds of execution is another part of it. And then really the name comes from when you're in and running a recurring revenue business, the funnel has no role, right? The funnel is sort of meaningless. It's a lot more about, the story starts when somebody becomes a customer. It doesn't end there. And so there's this whole world to explore, before, like in the problem space, all the way through to product adoption, product engagement, expansion, loyalty. So that's the reason for Forget the Funnel.
I love it. And there's so many different kinds of businesses that are listening to this podcast today. We've got businesses like mine, where we have a membership or a conference, and there is like a recurring nature to the kinds of businesses that I do. And then of course there's software companies that are listening. And of course there's consumer-based companies that are listening. There's people that have local businesses that care about recurring revenue. So the whole concept here, I think, is really fascinating. And the word that we kind of talked about when we were prepping for this show was customer-led growth. That was kind of the phrase we came up with. So if marketers pay attention to this concept we're going to talk about, what is the upside? Because I do feel like there is this there's something special here that we're about to unlock.
Oh, I'm glad you think so. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And yes, very applicable. I would say that most businesses, most companies think of themselves as recurring revenue businesses, maybe not as directly as a software as a service company would, but subscription model, any, e-commerce too would think of themselves as recurring revenue. So this is very applicable across the board. And we did write a book about this process, and we've even though we work mostly with B2B SaaS companies, I've heard from hundreds of people outside of that industry that really have gotten a lot of value from customer-led growth, which is the framework that we unpack in this book. So what you get from customer-led growth, I mean, I almost don't know where to begin, but the biggest thing I would say, particularly for marketers, the main takeaway for marketers is a lot less guessing about what to do. The strategy, your go-to-market strategy becomes much, much clearer. And you no longer have to operate in experimentation and hypothesis mode. You can make really well-informed decisions about what to do and how to grow. And the other really added huge benefit to customer-led growth is that it's also a framework that you share across the cross-functional, departments in your company. And so marketing and CS and product and sales, have a much more organized and sort of operationalized view of the customer experience and their role in it. And so it's not just to the benefit of marketing, that also helps sort of, build a lot more bridges to your adjacent teams as well.
Love it. Okay. So there's some groundwork that we might want to cover here a little bit, right? So before we get into how to do all this stuff that we're about to talk about, is there any kind of concepts or mindsets or any kind of like things we need to discuss before we get into this?
I mean, I would definitely say the biggest one is there being an agreement and alignment on the team that the customer should really be at the center of your growth strategy. I'm not saying that what that doesn't mean is everything the customer says is true and you should always follow customer feedback. That's not what I mean at all. But an agreement that if your customers are successful, you will be successful. As long as the team is in agreement on that, then customer-led growth will work for you, because it is really about thinking about the customer as being the center of gravity, thinking about delivering customer value as being the center of gravity, and operationalizing the way you build strategy, but also operationalizing your team around delivering that value to customers. So that's definitely a do not pass go. That's the, must have alignment. The next would be, maybe where a lot of people start with this, but a really deep understanding of customers. We can talk, a little bit more about how we do that and how we recommend doing that. But having a really deep understanding of your ideal customers is obviously another, a critical input here.
When we were prepping, you also mentioned that sometimes quantitative data, which marketers focus on, is sometimes not the right focus. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
What a time to pull that one in. So yes, I completely agree. And I think that's kind of what I was alluding to before when I was saying like operating in experimentation mode. A lot of teams do that. And I can totally understand why. It's actually part of why we started Forget the Funnel, was this sort of need by a lot of go-to-market teams, particularly marketing, this need to prove that we are doing something, prove that we are taking action and making progress. And sometimes the superficial quant sort of data can pull us in directions that just aren't helpful, or that just lead to sort of scattershot strategy. We hear that a lot from the founders that reach out to us. Like, our team is great. I know they care a lot. They're super smart, but the strategy feels scattershot. And a lot of the time that's because marketing teams are operating based on like quantitative, like what the data says to do, before centering on who is it that we even serve? What do they care about? Not at a demographic or quantitative level, but at a qualitative psychographic level, like what motivates these customers. That's really where things need to start. And then you layer on the quantitative later. Quantitative is very, very important, and the data is very important, but we really advocate for starting from a foundation of qualitative insight first, in order to contextualize the quantitative. That was a lot of quant back and forth.
Yeah.
But
okay. So I think what I'm hearing you say is a couple things. Number one, the the non-negotiables that one should have if you are to adopt what we're about to share here is that the customer is at the center of the objective of growing, right? Like a deep understanding, which we're going to get into very shortly. In addition, if you're too focused on the wrong quantitative data, which is the things that are measurable, right? Like click-through rates and impressions and views and all that kind of stuff. It sounds like what I'm hearing you say is that can send you false signals that get you down rabbit trails that get you in trouble. Is that really what you're saying?
Yeah, it's often a distraction. Not always. Again, if that foundational work has been done,
Right.
then it can be great and it can layer on understanding. But 9 times out of 10, that foundational level is not there. And if it is there, it's out of date and antiquated, especially now because the market is changing so quickly. So yeah, a lot of the time it's busy work. It's like activity does not equal progress. And that is kind of the mess that we sometimes get into. And I'm more and more, I'm describing this as strategic quicksand, especially right now. There's a lot of busy work and desperation to show activity because of all the things happening in the market, especially in tech. So it's just, it can be a bit of a mess. And I've
Yeah.
heard from far too many folks in-house, struggling with this. So it's a very real thing.
That's a perfect transition into something you said multiple times, which is deeply understanding customers. So I'm assuming that's where we begin. And if so, talk to me a little bit about this, about this. I know you have a lot to say about this.
Yeah, I mean, what I will start with saying is that I understand that teams' appetite for research is not always equal, right? Like some teams, some organizations have a bigger appetite for research than others. We generally operate on the assumption that there is not a big appetite for research and that research is a means to an end and not, it can, a lot of people have had bad experiences with research that has led nowhere, research that has led to more questions than answers, research that gets dusty on a shelf. Not effective research. And it happens a lot. We've talked about that on our podcast before. It is, people have mixed histories with research. So for that, there's a couple of things like I don't tend to center everything we do around customer research because really at the end of the day, what we're looking for is genuine insight and genuine understanding into what matters, the actual signal in all of that research that we do. But then also the really important part and why we exist, like our reason for existence is making sure that research actually gets used and operationalized and leveraged and turned into actual positive customer outcomes and revenue growth overall. So it's a means to an end. Now, I say all that to say that's one sort of side of the coin. The other side of the coin is we never advocate for more research than is absolutely necessary. And so when we do research, we do very rapid style, very laser targeted research, but it's laser targeted at the high level. And what I mean by that is we're looking for customers' jobs to be done. A lot of people have some familiarity with jobs to be done, but just the TLDR version of jobs to be done really is like deeply understanding what customers are trying to achieve, the progress they're looking to make with your solution. And so it means deeply understanding what's the context, what's going on in their world when they're struggling with the old way. What is that moment that leads them to seek out something new? Once they decide, that they have to have something new, what steps do they go through to evaluate potential options? Once they do, find you on a short list, what is it about you that really, convinces them to give it a try? What stands out to them? What convinces them to keep going? What demonstrates to them that you're going to help them solve that job to be done? And then ultimately, what can they do now that they weren't able to do before? So I'm very zoomed out at the 30,000 foot view. But if you can understand that sort of documentary under story of your customer, then you've got the answers that you need.
Cool. I want to dig in here a little bit because when I asked where do we begin, you started talking about research, but you did focus mostly on like people's maybe disdain, general dissatisfaction with research. But I think what you're really saying is we need to understand who our customers are, right? And not just any customers, but certain customers, right? So just get specific a little bit for everybody who's out here about the why behind this and a little bit of the how, and then we'll
Yeah.
get into the jobs to be done, because I feel like we just need to unpack this a little bit more.
Yeah, totally. So the why is essentially, I have to talk about who first.
Okay.
And the who is really, really important here. So I mentioned before, we never advocate for big, long research projects. We're always looking to do really laser targeted research. And what we have found is the most effective research that you can do is learning from your customers who are the happiest, those that you would have to, pry your product or solution out of their cold, dead hands. Like those are the customers that we want to learn from. Really importantly, recency. I mentioned before that, and everybody is acutely aware, the market has dramatically changed in the last 6 months. And so another really important factor here is recency. So we want the people who have made a decision, experienced the problem, made a decision to try you, made a trade-off in order to choose you, and they did it all within the last, couple of months, let's say. Now, obviously, from industry.
Why is that? Why is that?
Yeah, well, because we don't want them to, we're talking about, 10 to 12 conversations that we're going to have with these folks. We do not want them, giving us, filling the gaps in their memory. We want them to viscerally remember how much it sucked to have the problem that you now help them solve, right? So we want them to be very, very close as possible to that problem space. But we also want them to have experienced value with your solution. So we need that arc in their story to be, as fresh as possible in their memory.
Okay, so when we're talking to these customers, tell us a little bit about how we would do this. Let's say that I am able to do this myself, and I want to talk to, let's say, 10, 12 of my most recent customers who are like overly overjoyed, and they've been onboarded in the last 3 to 6 months, let's say hypothetically.
Yep.
What are we looking for when we're talking to them?
Yeah. So these conversations, they're called switch interviews. That's the technical term for the type of interview that you're running here. But really, what we're looking to uncover is their job to be done. So we're looking to have them basically walk us through what happened. We don't want conjecture. We don't want opinions necessarily. We want to understand what actually, walk me through that experience. We're just asking them to tell us the story of what happened and what stood out and why they made certain decisions and who was involved, especially in a B2B, purchase decision. There's other people involved. So that's a really important part of the process often. What was it about our solution that convinced you to keep going? Like what stood out to you? We're asking those types of questions, deal breaker questions, anxiety questions, motivation questions. And if we can have those conversations when we work with teams, we have these conversations we can get this story within 30 minutes. So we're having 10 to 12 30-minute conversations with these ideal customers, right? So there's a segment of your customers that you would describe as very happy and recent, right? And getting a lot of value from your product today. Have 10 to 12 conversations with those customers, and you will start to see patterns emerge. Like as you are having these conversations, you're going to start to hear the same things. And as soon as you start to hear the same things over and over again, you're going to realize, okay, I'm reaching pattern saturation here. If you're not hearing the same things after 10, 12 calls, you probably need to do more calls until you do start to see those patterns emerge. But eventually you're going to reach what the research nerds call pattern saturation. And then that you can, stop running interviews. Generally, we reach pattern saturation within 10 to 12 conversations. And that only takes about, 2 weeks to do those interviews. So I'm not talking about a big research project here.
Okay, so when we were prepping, you said that there was a scheduling tool that you've been working with that you could share a little bit about how that story went. Maybe there's a different one that's on top of your mind now.
Yeah. Well, I'll just tell that one because it's an easy one to call back to, actually. So this is a team that we worked with not too long ago, and they're in the social media scheduling space. And they were their growth had flatlined and they didn't really know what to do, but they were great at content marketing. And also their ads performed generally pretty well in terms of sign up, but revenue was flat. So they had steady signups, but again, revenue, they really couldn't, there was nothing they could do that really influenced the revenue number. So they did what they do best. They did more content marketing. They ran more ads, but nothing was really moving the needle. So when we started working with them, we ran through this exercise like I just described to you, where we, identified what was that subset of customers that were really, really happy, getting a ton of value, and that had signed up recently. And we had 10 to 12 conversations. I believe it was maybe even 10. I can't recall exactly. And what we found was there were two major groups of customers that showed up in their customer base, that showed up at their front door, right? Those that were looking to grow their audience, and the other that was looking to automate their processes and how they had been working.
You call these jobs to be done, right? Is that what we're talking about?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So the two main, there was a third one that showed up, but really these were the two dominant jobs to be done. And what was really interesting about that, learning that these two different groups were showing up at the front door, was that this team had been targeting both of these jobs to be done as if they were one individual for the history of the company. They just assumed that everybody showing up at the front door had both of these jobs to be done, but they didn't. They were actually two genuinely different groups of customers showing up at the front door. And so what we did was we went through the customer-led growth process, but I'll skip to the end, where essentially we updated their messaging strategy to focus more on those automators, because those looking to grow their audience were very vocal. They were the vocal majority. So it was very it was very easy, for the team to sort of index on that first group, because they were the vocal majority.
But they weren't the ones where the revenue was coming from, probably, right?
And that second group, they were onboarding more quickly. They were not contacting CS. They were sort of flying in under the radar. Meanwhile, sticking around for the retention in that group was a lot higher as well. So this team had been conflating these two groups of customers under one banner for literally years. I think it had been 5 years. And they had never pulled these two apart. So when we split the messaging and really focused the messaging on that second group, and we updated 3 pages on the website, the home page, the product page, and the pricing page. And with the just messaging changes, not even any really major sort of design changes, just from a messaging standpoint, the conversion rate on the website increased 98%.
Wow.
But way more interesting than that was their trial to pay conversion rate increased 40%. And we didn't touch anything other than 3 pages on their website, which meant not only were there more people coming through the front door, but they were higher quality as well. And that was just from understanding these two different groups of customers showing up.
I love it. Okay. So far, what we've discovered is that we really need to talk to our best customers, our happiest customers, to kind of reverse engineer the jobs that they are doing, the major jobs that they are doing. Yeah. And then I'm discerning, because I'm a data guy, that you were able to look at these two different groups and kind of determine where they fit into the actual customer database. And that was some work that you probably did after you did these interviews to kind of put these customers into different kinds of buckets. And that's when you discovered, whoa, we've been actually targeting if you're targeting two different groups of people with the same message, you're targeting none of those people, right? That's the problem, right? You're just creating confusion because they don't care about the other half of the message. So this is valuable. And this is like a major aha and wake up moment. So once you've actually discovered these jobs to be done, talk to me a little bit about what comes next, because obviously we're right now still in the research phase. This story you shared with us, you've gone way beyond the research phase, but once you've got some preliminary research, you've identified, I forget what you called this, this thread. What did you call the thread that in the switch interviews, you said you're looking for this pattern or whatever?
like the documentary-like understanding of your customer's journey, basically. We call it a customer experience map. For a couple of reasons, which I can get into.
Well, let's talk about that, because obviously that's getting into the next part. So once you've actually discovered these interesting insights, what the heck do you do with it?
Yeah. So, the first thing that we do once we learn of these different jobs to be done in the customer base is we go back to the team and we say, hey, team, these two different groups of customers are showing up at the front door. And oftentimes it's 3, by the way, sometimes 4, but for sake of simplicity in that story, there were 2 that were a main focus. But there's a decision to be made, because especially right now, this is a really critical part of this process, is really deciding which job to be done do we want to focus on moving forward? Because we can't, serve everyone, and we have to put one foot in front of the other, particularly for the, benefit of the team and understanding how to put one foot in front of the other. We generally advocate for prioritizing one job to be done. There are cases where you might want to marry two if you absolutely need to, but I would do that under advisement only. So really prioritizing one job to be done is a really important part of this process. Now, with the wearing the hat of, or in the shoes of, or wearing the glasses of, or whatever, of this customer with this job to be done, you are now going to basically go through the end-to-end customer experience. You're going to do the secret shopper thing. We call it like a heuristic. We look at marketing campaigns. We look at the website. We look at the onboarding experience. We look at the product experience. We look at the emails we're receiving. We look at the upsell flows and the expansion campaigns and customer education. We go through the entire customer experience, again, completely through the lens of a customer with this job to be done. That's a really, really important lens to review all of this through. And because we're going through the end-to-end customer experience, we are, with this new understanding of customers, we are going to see all of the ways that our customer experience is out of alignment with that ideal customer.
Okay, real quick here, because yeah. I know that we're going to talk about all this, but there was this section in the middle of our interview where we're going to talk about how to map and measure this experience. I would like to talk about this experience map. I think you might have just briefly, kind of gone over it real quick, but I think it'd be really valuable for us to dig in on this.
For sure. Yeah, I was teeing it up. So once we've gone through that customer experience, we are going to understand all of these sort of major leaps of faith in our customer's relationship with us. And what I mean by that is even the stage where our customers don't even know that we exist, but when they're experiencing the problem that we are going to help them solve. So the problem space, wildly important. Way too many customer journey maps leave the problems, stage out, which is, I think, a massive oversight and really, really problematic. So there's the problem stage, and then we move all the way through to expansion and growth. Now, we tend to think of customer experience maps as being organized into three major phases: the struggle phase, where they're struggling with the old way; the evaluation phase, which you can, deduce, I'm sure, that, is them evaluating the solution and then ultimately deciding that it is going to solve their job to be done. And then there's the growth phase, which, again, recurring revenue businesses, they live and die in this growth phase, right? So acquiring somebody as a customer is the beginning of the story. So the growth phase is really about ongoing value being delivered, ongoing engagement, but also expanding on that value. And so there's a lot to talk about in the growth phase. We don't nearly enough get to talk about the growth phase because everybody's so hell-bent on acquisition. Marketing, by the way, has a role to play across this entire customer experience. But basically, our job is to figure out, in those three phases, what are the major milestones in our customer's relationship with us where they need to experience value in order to continue to the next stage. And so we call that customer experience mapping. The number of milestones will completely depend on your solution, your customer, how complex either your customer is or your solution is. So, we never say there's 4 stages, or there's 5, or there's 6, or there's 7. You can't really think about it in that way. It's genuinely for you. So this is another reason why we take issue with funnels, because they're formulaic and generic. They don't actually reflect your customers or your experience. So that's the customer experience mapping process.
Real quick on this map process, can you give us an example maybe of a client and kind of like help us understand what you discovered in each of these 3 phases, just so people can wrap their head around this thing?
Yeah. So great example, actually. Your audience might know a little marketer called Rand Fishkin and Amanda.
Was on the
show. Yeah. So SparkToro, we actually worked with SparkToro not too long ago, and they have a really crystal clear sort of way that we were able to unpack their customer experience and identify where they were missing an opportunity. So one of the things that we learned about their customers was that there was, and I don't have to get into the specifics here, but there was a feature that was being introduced, like a product attribute, a part of this product of SparkToro that was being introduced too late. So it was after activation, after onboarding, in the more like what you would consider the like product engagement stage when somebody has become a customer. Then they get introduced to this feature. But what we realized was that was actually a key motivator for people even choosing SparkToro. And so we realized is when we moved that feature, the introduction of that feature and how it was introduced up in the customer experience to what we call the first value or the adoption stage, they doubled their their free to paid conversion rate. Because we got to move that. Now, obviously, it's credit fully to the team. They understood the assignment when we mentioned that this feature was buried too far down as their customer experience. They knew exactly what to do, and we made a couple of recommendations. They rolled out emails. They rolled out in-app product onboarding that introduced this feature more sooner, and they doubled their free to paid conversion rate, which is huge.
So just help me map the struggle and the evaluation and the growth phase, maybe through the RAND experience, like just so without getting super detailed, just so people can understand like the kinds of discoveries that they might be able to make if they were to do something similar.
Yeah. So the first thing you definitely need to do is identify what are those major milestones. So I can talk through them at a high level, and then I would talk about how to optimize, because you optimize at the milestone level, but you gotta know what the milestones are first. So we talk about the struggle phase. Generally, we're talking about 2, maximum 3 milestones there, where it's the problem space. Somebody's out in the world, they have the problem that you have, they're struggling with the old way. And then there's the interest stage where they go into active solution seeking mode and they discover that you exist. They may land on your website. Generally, I would say that interest stage ends when somebody either, books a demo or attends a demo or signs up for your product for free or starts a trial. And then we move into evaluation mode. And evaluation mode, it is wildly important that we demonstrate value as quickly as possible. It's not going to be full value, but we call it first value because we need to help people see value quickly enough that they don't abandon ship. Because I think there's a stat that's 70% of people who sign up for a product log in once and never log it back in again. So it's really, really important that we demonstrate this like promise of value in the product as quickly as we possibly can. And there's a lot of different mechanisms to do that, but I digress. And then depending on the complexity of your product, in some cases there's a milestone in the middle, but I'm going to skip over that one because the most important one at the end of evaluation is what we call value realization. And that's when somebody has fully adopted your product and is like, Eureka, this thing has solved my problem. I'm going to invite my team. I'm firing the old way. I'm done with how I used to do it. This is me forever. I'm a lifer now. And that is the end of the evaluation phase when we've like quote unquote solved their job to be done. Then in the growth phase, it is about delivering continued value. Generally, the growth phase looks similar across the teams that we've worked with. Sometimes it's a little bit more complex, but in general, it's continued value and value growth. In continued value, that's when you get to break out more of the toys in the toy box. So some of the more advanced features, or adding additional team members, or moving into adjacent teams potentially that would be in value expansion or value growth rather. And so that growth phase is where we start talking about net revenue retention. We're certainly talking about retention, but we're also talking about net revenue retention. And because we've operationalized the customer experience in this way, we have KPIs for each of those milestones. And that gives us a very measurable way to see what milestone, what stage in the customer experience is our customer, so that if anybody falls out, we can be proactive in helping them get back in. So we can either reach out to them or we can send them emails, but we'll know when they are at risk. And so for the value, continued value milestone, that would be a lot about like retention. Are they showing any signals of, early attrition or churn that we can, see and get ahead of to retain them? And then value growth, when we, start thinking about upsell or moving them to annual or moving into adjacent teams. There's all again, it's very product specific, but that's how generally the customer experience sort of breaks down across those milestones. Once you have those milestones identified and the KPIs identified, you go back to that secret shopper experience where you saw all of the ways that your customer experience is out of alignment. Now you get to optimize for one KPI on each of those milestones. It is just a much more organized, systematic way of optimizing your customer's experience.
So this is really interesting across multiple levels, because we've got these three parts of this customer experience map, and I'm imagining an actual map in my mind. We've got the struggle phase, which is the phase where customers are dealing with struggles, perhaps using a competitor's product or service, and they don't know a better way. And then you've got the evaluation phase, where presumably they are going out and looking for solutions, or looking specifically at your solution.
At yours. Yeah. This okay. I recognize I'm not precious about the names of these things, and we all have different.
So they're looking at, they're finally at the point where they're aware of who the heck you are, and they've gone out and they're now analyzing whether you are the solution that they're seeking.
That's right.
And then we've got the growth phase. Now, this is intriguing, because if I think about marketing in the way that I traditionally think about marketing is mostly targeting people that have the struggle or that are actively evaluating. And typically it's somebody else, once they're a customer, who handles all this stuff, right? And what I want you to make the connection on is, okay, we've got customers who have been through the struggle phase, which is why you want to talk to them within the last 6 months, so they remember the struggle, right? And you've got customers who've gone through the evaluation phase.
Yep.
And the reason you want to talk to them is because you may not have even identified what the little tiny wins are along the path, right? You might just have lucked out, because a lot of marketers throw spaghetti against the wall, it sticks, and they just fire more spaghetti against the wall, right? Right. But what you're advocating for is like, hey, let's get a little bit of insights into the customers so we can identify all those little actions that they took during that evaluation phase in particular, and the actions they likely took when they were just in the struggle phase, because all of this is incredible fodder for you to eventually use in your future messaging and marketing. Is that right?
100%. Yeah. And by the way, it's not only the marketing team. Obviously, you can imagine that, a CS team or a product team or sales team, obviously all the entire go-to-market function, all the go-to-market functions.
Sometimes really small businesses don't have those teams, though. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. 100%. So, we call it the struggle phase. Generally, you'd think of like traditional marketing as being focused on the struggle phase. Right. And the struggle phase, why we call it that, it's like they're still struggling with the old way. So they might be an early evaluation. They might be comparing you to other solutions. They might be, using nothing. They might be coming into a new job. They might, be using a spreadsheet so many times. It's a spreadsheet that you're actually competing with, right? So they're struggling with the old way. They're still using the old way, and they're in that early evaluation phase. That's what we call interest. And then that milestone really becomes about like your marketing reaches them in the problem stage, and then your website, your landing pages, that early sort of experience is really the interest stage. And then once they actually get into like evaluating your solution, then we switch into like actual solution evaluation of your solution for solving their job to be done. So organizing the customer experience in this way really gives you, like, you can go really deep on all of those milestones. And if you've got KPIs that demonstrate the way we describe KPIs is like, we'll know we've done our jobs delivering value to customers when they reach this KPI. It is not a transactional KPI. I'm not talking about MQLs, SQLs. I do not care. No customer cares about them becoming an MQL, right? That's not a thing. Also, MQLs are highly problematic for many reasons.
Why don't you explain what the heck that is for people that don't even know what the heck that is?
It's like a marketing qualified lead, right?
Oh,
so you might say, we downloaded an ebook. That means they're marketing qualified. Like,
I see.
That doesn't mean anything to your customer. It means something to you, maybe. It means something to your marketing automation platform, but it means nothing to your customer. So when we talk about KPIs, it's really like, our customers experience enough value to convince them to keep going. And we have this measurable way of demonstrating to us that we've done our job. So that's how we think about those KPIs. When we work with teams, we literally map the customer experience and we go milestone by milestone. And we say, like, is this a good way to demonstrate to the team that we've helped customers get from one milestone to the next? We unpack these milestones through a couple of different lenses, the thinking, feeling, doing. That's a bit of a detail, but it is really, really helpful to unpack it in that way to identify all of the opportunities.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the process that we go through really, because we understand that customer at that much deeper, more psychographic level, right? We're not talking about the transactional moments. We're talking about like, what was the progress they were looking to make? What actually motivated them to continue moving forward? And we really zero in on the things that they actually care about, that actually matters. What we have found with teams over the many, many years that we have been doing this is we tend to throw the kitchen sink at our customers with a lot of stuff that they do not care about. That's why I mentioned that, like, when they reach the, after value realization, when they reach continued value, that's when you can break out more of those toys in the toy box. But they're not ready for those toys at the beginning of the evaluation phase, right? They're really looking for like the one thing that really matters to them. So we are oftentimes telling teams to remove a bunch of stuff from their customer experience, particularly through the onboarding experience, as we optimize either the like in-app experience or emails or whatever, and really staying focused on what customers actually really care about. And it simplifies things immensely.
So you mentioned earlier the secret shopping concept. So tell me a little bit about what we're doing there.
Yeah, so that's essentially the work of going through the customer experience through the lens of somebody with that job to be done. And it can be a tough, grueling experience, especially for teams who have recently updated their website or recently overhauled their onboarding or, what have you, because all of these teams are working on this stuff actively. So it can be tough to go through this experience and then realize that, I just spent 6 months on an email campaign that completely misses the mark. Like, nobody wants to do that.
So what are we looking for when we're actually doing the secret shopping? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it definitely helps to be outside the jar when doing this type of work. It helps to be outside of the jar when doing the customer research as well, by the way. So it is a bit of an advantage. And obviously we have just a ton of diplomacy when we're communicating this stuff back to teams. But like, again, a lot of times we're just overwhelming our customers with a bunch of stuff that they care about a little bit instead of really zeroing in on the stuff that they care about a lot. And we're leaving money on the table, or filling a leaky bucket, whatever analogy you want. So that's a lot of what we're doing, is basically identifying all of the ways that our customer experience is out of alignment with what those customers actually really care about. And so we go through a start, stop, continue kind of activity where we're looking at the things like what is actually hurting your customer experience, what might be actually causing people to drop out that you just need to straight up stop doing. More often than not, it's something that they are doing but needs to be updated, especially with more mature teams that they've got, programmatic comms in place, they've got email nurtures in place, product onboarding in place. A lot of the times we're making updates, largely simplifying product onboarding experiences, email campaigns, and things like that. And then there's the things that you genuinely need to start doing. So that might be, hey, you have more complex customers and they need a sales touch. They need a call here to walk them through this process. Or, hey, your customers, they don't want to be on a sales call. Get out of their way. Just let them into the product. And this is the way to introduce the product. So sometimes we're telling teams that as well, that they should introduce either like a self-serve product experience. Sometimes that happens a lot where customers are just like, I know exactly what I want. I don't want to get on a sales call. The sales call was almost a deterrent to signing up. And so a lot of times we're introducing flows like that, either in-app or email, or sometimes it's actually reorganizing like the information architecture on a website, where a website is way too complicated, talks about like industry and vertical when like everybody showing up has the same job to be done and there's nothing really about solving that. So websites also, we tend to talk about websites a lot and the IA of a website and things that might be missing or things that just should be cut or things that need to be optimized. So again, we go through that start, stop, continue. And then for each of the milestones, we have a list of opportunities. And then with all of those opportunities across all the milestones, we do a prioritizing workshop with the team.
So, okay. So what I'm hearing you say is that every single communication touch point, whether it be an ad, an email, a sign up form, an autoresponder, an actual login, all these different touch points, we should audit them, and we should make sure that we put on the glasses of the ideal customer, and we need to ask ourselves, does the message and or the experience attract or repel that ideal audience? And if it repels them, you'll identify some obvious areas where it repels them. And you didn't state this, but I'm assuming you begin a split test at this point and you prove the hypothesis out. Is that typically what you do or no?
So that comes later. That would come after prioritization. So
right.
Again,
assuming you prioritize the list, I mean, you would want to put it to the test, would you not?
Yeah, exactly. But there's some ways to do that that are more impactful than others. Like I wouldn't go into conversion rate optimization on a website. I would go to, we need to write a whole new messaging strategy.
Redesign the whole damn thing. Yep. And then
redesign. Actually,
the message strategy. I don't mean design.
Messaging is all like every single team that we work with gets a messaging guide, because every single team that we work with learns something new about their customer, focuses in on what they actually really care about. And so we develop a messaging strategy and deliver them a messaging guide. That messaging guide can do a lot of things. It can influence the website, obviously. It can influence customer onboarding. It can influence marketing campaigns. So first thing, messaging strategy always gets prioritized. After messaging strategy, then we would go to what part of the customer experience is actually causing the biggest, like the most damage. 9 times out of 10, it's the customer onboarding, right? It's not, I mean, the website obviously is a fast follow, because oftentimes the website is, cashing checks, the other way around, writing checks that the customer experience can't cash. And that happens a lot, but often we're focused on customer onboarding and making sure that those product fit customers are actually turning into paying customers. That's generally the most important thing. Also, actually, I will say sidebar, if you've got retention issues, retention is number one. So let me just assume that retention is healthy in this situation. Then it's customer onboarding. We're literally reverse engineering customer onboarding. And then it would be, again, depending on the size of your team, you might be able to do these things at the same time. But if you've got a small team, I would fix customer onboarding first, then I would fix the website, then I would turn off marketing campaigns, especially if you're spending on ads. Pause those, reallocate resources to fixing the foundation before you turn your ads or any of your marketing campaigns back on.
Well, Georgiana, Laudi, we have just tapped the surface of what's in that brain of yours. I know that there's so much more there. And if folks want to discover you or follow you, what's your preferred social platform? And if they want to work with you, where do you want to send them?
Yeah, I mean, I try to be active on LinkedIn. I have a hard time these days for many reasons, but LinkedIn would probably be the social platform of choice for the moment. But really, forgetthefunnel.com is the right place to go to find out about how to work with us. We also, as I mentioned before, we have a book. It's very short, very practical, so it's easy to read. It's not a big theoretical thing. And the book actually comes along with a workbook as well, with a lot of templates and tools. So if you want to try to DIY this, you absolutely can. If you want to do it in just a couple of weeks, reach out to us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.